But to your point, giving ourselves that stillness and the space to go, oh, wow, there is a shy little quiet one in the back of the classroom, and I never even knew it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I discovered was my body had been telling me all along, oh, I want you to move into this apartment. And I had forgotten that in the noise of all the other children in the classroom.
Yeah. To help people begin to understand that not with all of it, but with much of these changes that we make with lifestyle, there will come a point where you will realize, oh my God, I haven't thought about that in days, maybe hours. Maybe it starts real small. Maybe it's, I haven't wanted a cigarette in 10 minutes. Celebrate that. If that is cause for celebration, if that to you is empirical evidence that you have made change, that's a good thing. I think about my own personal process of unraveling my PTSD. And I used to be so chronically anxious and the sound of my neighbor's apartment door opening used to cause panic within me, not because there was a reason to be panicked, but just it was that response of the nervous system being so keyed up and so hardwired into that fight or fight or freeze response that, oh my God. And it would take me a good few minutes to calm my system and remind myself everything's fine. Fast forward 10, 15 years later, and I was living in Seattle at the time and in an apartment building, and my neighbor came and went several times. And it took me a minute, and I had this moment of going, oh my God, I didn't get afraid. Like nothing happened. There was no catch. There was not that moment of like, what are we doing? Are we freaking out? Are we, what are we? It was just, oh, there's someone. Is so to me, in that moment, I realized, wow, that response is no longer embedded in my system to the degree that it is the default. Sure, there's a part of me that will probably always want to respond that way, but it was not the loudest voice in the room anymore. And that's what I call sort of learning and growing through the absence of something. It's like when I smoked, and after I quit smoking for months, I would smell smoke and be like, oh my God, that was so good. I really would love to have a cigarette. Now, the smell of it just, it repels my body. Like I don't like the smell. I don't like it's just something that I can't even conceive of ever wanting again. But it took me time to get there.
Yeah. And I would say that's a common experience, especially with the nervous system, because so many of us are in that fight or flight chronically, and we don't remember what it's like to not feel that way. For me and a recent client of mine, we both had this revelation through absence. And you can't, there's no other way to experience it except unraveling.
Yeah. Yeah. To your point, you're never going to know what it's like to have a life without eating chocolate until you stop eating chocolate.
Yeah.
And that's just the cut and dried plane of it. That's just the reality objectively. And I understand if someone's at the precipice of change and wants to make it and they're afraid, I understand why you're afraid. Absolutely. And the system wants you to reassure it that everything's going to be okay. Sometimes maybe you don't even know if it's going to be okay, but you just have to trust that it will. But to understand that at some point, the only way you're going to know what a life without smoking is like is to not smoke. There's just no way around that. And that might sound silly to someone on the outside going, well, yeah, of course. But when you are making big change, especially in those physiological and neurological habits and patterns, you're going to have to be the one in control of the kids in the classroom. You're going to have to remind yourself that the mind may have that, oh my God. And you just say, okay, this is my technique. What I would say, okay, I'm aware. Wow, okay, look at that adrenaline coursing through my body. Wow, my mouth is so dry. Oh my gosh, my palms are so sweaty. There's a knot in my gut. Wow, I'm having a thought right now that is telling me that if I don't do this, I'm going to die. Interesting. I'm not going to die, but interesting how that voice is saying that.
Yeah, and that's a very good walkthrough of one of the ways that we can be in witness to our own experiences. It can be challenging at first, and we may only get, the first two observations out of that, and then we go into the emotion itself.
Yeah.
But the more we practice it, the more we can stay in that sovereign witness, and then we can choose,
Yeah.
after a while, we can choose how we want to engage.
Yeah. And documenting that for me through journaling was powerful because then I could go back and read it. And it would remind me of things that I knew when I was calm and in control. But in the moment of panic or activation, I would forget, right? Because again, the mind's now just looking for the exit. So to remember, and this actually is one of my favorite tools, and I may have already shared this, so apologies to anybody for me repeating this, but I call it, when I was unraveling my anxiety, I created this tool called What's the Worst That Can Happen? And if I was having a particularly anxious moment, I would give myself time and space. And here's the key: you set a timer on your phone for at least 10 minutes. You can go longer, but it can't be any less than 10, because you need to give yourself some time to work through the autonomic or the trained responses. I would sit down, I would start the timer on my phone, and I would activate that anxiety. And then I would write, oh my God, if I don't have a cigarette right now, I'm going to die. Oh my God, this is what is going to happen. And I would just let myself write. Then when the timer goes off, I would close the book, get up, and take my little anxiety monster with me. But the point here in reiterating that tool is what it gave me was being able to go back and read those journal entries so that now I could see it objectively. Now I wasn't in the anxiety. It was like I was the
Mm.
teacher again, looking at the student coming to me and saying, I'm really freaked out and I'm really anxious. I say, well, of course you are. You just quit smoking. Your body is wanting things left, right, and center that it doesn't know how to make sense of. Of course you feel this way. And I'm sure it's the same thing with you as a doctor. If someone comes to you with a whole bunch of symptoms, they may be in a panic,
Yeah.
but your voice of reason gives them a space where they can start to make sense of it.
Yeah. And sometimes we need that. Sometimes we need an outside helper, outside coach, medical professional, healer to walk with us in that process because we can't quite come to the space of being a neutral observer. And it takes a little bit of their reflection on our experience to help us see that. And by their example, we can begin to learn that process. And some of the teachers I've had and some of the people I've worked with have really helped me look into the spaces that it's been hard for me to do on my own.